guess I'm going to come out of the closet, and yes, I'm Catholic.
Yeah, and I'm also Catholic.
If it wasn't
evident,
yeah, beforehand. But yes, so we're Catholic, and so we're going to be talking specifically about modernity as it relates to the Catholic Church. Also Christianity, more broadly speaking, but to a lesser degree. But Catholicism and Christianity are ultimately the same thing. So, but yes, so obviously, or I think it should be obvious that we're both Catholics, and we both believe that Christianity provides, I guess you could say, all the answers to all the problems that exist in the world. So it provides a framework or matrix of meaning and belief, so that in which everything that exists in the world and all the problems that exist in the world have some sort of reason or cause or some sort of ultimate meaning. So I'm thinking, like, why is there evil in the world? Well, because we believe in the fall and original sin. At the beginning of time, when Adam and Eve were created, at some point they both fell into sin and brought the human race with them and communicated that original sin to the rest of humanity, such that we live in a broken world that is full of evil and sin. But also, like, our faith doesn't stop there, that God sent his son Jesus Christ to save us. So Jesus incarnated, became a human being, lived, suffered, died on the cross, and then came back to life in the resurrection, with the promise that if we conform ourselves to him, then we can be saved too from this life of suffering and evil. So I guess that was a really fast, I guess, overview of kind of like our beliefs as Catholics, what our faith teaches us. But I guess, like, to that had a point. In order to drill down into the question of how is that faith passed on, right? Because I just said a bunch of stuff that requires an assent of faith. That, there was a fall, original sin resulted, Jesus Christ, fully God and fully man, became incarnate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, all of those things are things that we believe and that we were taught at some point, and both of us had to accept and make an assent of faith to. But then the question is, like, how was that faith passed down to us? In what way?
Yeah. I mean, I guess you would, like, first say, like, your family, like your parents. That'd be sort of like the easy, obvious answer. But there's more to it than that, right?
Right. Well, because we all know that, every kid always listens to everything that their parents teach them or tell them, right?
Yes, of course.
I know I did. Don't know about you. But yeah, no, it's kind of like trying to think of a way of, like, encapsulating this idea that we're trying to talk about. The transmission of faith, the transmission of belief. It's pretty interesting, like, when you think about, like, how faith, belief, gets transmitted from one generation to the next. Because, I mean, obviously, like, you're right. The first thing that does come to mind is family. Okay, like, if you're born into a family that's Catholic and you're raised Catholic, okay.
I guess I would say, like,
then, like, what about your parents? Like, okay,
tradition, you know, some sort of tradition. There has to be things that you're doing that are the same across generations, right? So if you keep changing up, you know, the rituals or whatever, then that's going to be hard to get passed down. It's constantly changing.
Right. Well, if the way I practice, I guess, Catholicism, my religion, is radically different than the way my great-grandparents practiced the same, well, supposedly the same religion. Well, then I guess there's some questions that need to be asked. The first, most obvious one is, well, is it the same religion? But
Yeah.
if it is, I guess the second more important question is, like, okay, it might be the same religion, but is the way that you're practicing it going to foster the same fundamental faith in the same thing? And I think that's there's a term for that. It's on the tip of my tongue. Have you ever heard the term praxis?
Practice?
You know, praxis.
No, I have not.
Yes, I get to teach Jude something. So it's, but you know, so doctrine, right?
Yeah.
You know what doctrine is. Okay, so doctrine, right, is like the set of defined beliefs that we have to believe. So,
right. Yeah.
Jesus Christ is fully God and fully man. Okay, that's doctrine. Praxis, on the other hand, it's not doctrine. It's praxis is a funny way of, or a fancy way of describing practices. So what are the practices that people engage in when they live out their faith? So to think of an example, so it's a doctrine that Mary can intercede for. Well, is that a doctrine? I mean, it has to be a doctrine that Mary can intercede on our behalf if we pray for her intercession.
Yeah, that kind of sounds. I mean, I don't know for a fact, but that definitely seems like it should be.
If we had comments, I would say put in the comments and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But so just for the sake of an example, it's in a sense, it's an abstract belief that Mary can intercede for us, right? So we both believe that Mary can intercede for us. But that's just, at that point, that's just an abstract idea in our heads, right? How do people go about asking for her intercession? You can pray the rosary. You can, I guess, visit a Marian shrine.
There's all kinds of devotions to Mary,
right?
Participate in.
Exactly. You could pray the Hail Mary. You can pray the Little Office of the Blessed Virgin Mary. That all of those things fall under the realm of practice. Like, what are the kind of practical or cultural or human activities that one does in order to make our beliefs a reality?
Okay.
so I guess kind of to bring it back to what the question at hand, like how is belief, the stable kind of body of belief, transmitted from generation to generation? I think we could ultimately say that it all falls under praxis, or the practices that we engage in as believers. And I think you mentioned earlier tradition.
Yeah.
If you want to talk more about that, but that I would definitely say that definitely falls under praxis.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess if you're doing, so praxis, I guess would kind of refer to like the actual things you're doing concretely, and if those are different from generation to generation or couple generations, then what you're believing could, conceivably be different. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think so. Oh, but I don't want to spoil what we'll get to in a little bit.
Okay.
But
put a pin by that, I guess.
Yeah. Put a pin on it. But yeah, we came up with some other kind of thoughts as to what are the things that enable this sort of handing on of faith from one generation to the next. So obviously one of them is the Bible, the written word of God, which is insufficient by itself. Because as Catholics, we believe that not only truth doesn't just come from the Bible, but it also comes from tradition with a big T, which are kind of the beliefs and practices handed on by the apostles, right? The apostles in the church that Jesus founded. So the other kind of main avenue of this kind of passing on of belief, I would say, is the church. And there are a lot of things that fall under the category of the church, right? So like you have the ecclesiastical hierarchy that through apostolic succession has the authority to teach and interpret authoritatively. But then there are also things like the sacraments, which are kind of visible signs of invisible realities that nevertheless efficaciously kind of impart grace to those who participate in it. And finally, the Mass.
Yeah.
And this is what we thought we'd focus on specifically, at least for this episode. And all those other things are also very interesting too and very relevant to this question. But the Mass. Jude, what is the Mass for any non-Catholic listener out there?
I guess so. The Mass, I guess, would be like simply you could say is like the reenactment, I guess, of the Last Supper when Jesus sacrificed or gave his body to us. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I kind
it's
of
not a great definition.
Yeah, I mean, what is the Mass? Well, I mean, that is the most important part of it. So you captured that. The reality of the representation of Jesus' sacrifice on Calvary, which culminates in the Eucharist. But I guess more like broadly speaking, Because the Mass isn't just that, right? Like, it's not just the consecration of the bread and wine to become the body and blood. I guess one working definition that I thought of was, and this is just pretty basic, but that the Catholic Mass, or the liturgy is another way of referring to it, is the public prayer of the church, wherein, I guess, the entire community, or local community at least, gathers together as one to render worship to God. And ultimately, like, the highest form of worship that one can partake in is the representation of the Last Supper and the crucifixion, which is the Eucharist. But it's not just limited to that. It's a whole series of prayers and intercessions and psalms and scriptural readings, all with the express aim of rendering worship to God. I guess to be like a working definition of the Catholic Mass. But yeah, I brought up Catholic liturgy, and then I guess the question then becomes, well, what is liturgy? And I know we just kind of gave a rough definition of what Catholic Mass or Catholic liturgy is, but liturgy in and of itself, I guess an easier way, at least that I think about it, is kind of the embodiment and ritualization of belief. With kind of symbols and rituals that almost lost my train of thought. With symbols and rituals that capture and convey whatever community is celebrating a liturgy believes in. So, I'm trying to think of an example that isn't Catholic. Well, I guess, Jude, what do you do when you're at a Penguins game and they play the national anthem at the beginning of the game, and you're wearing a hat?
You take your hat off, place your hand over your heart. Usually you stand as well, out of respect, ultimately, I think. But
it's a flag. Why are you respecting a flag? It's a piece of fabric.
Well, yeah, see, that would be a symbol. Flag is a symbol of something else, something more, some ideal, I guess maybe you'd say. So, like, the flag of the United States stands for United States of America, the country, but then also, the sort of like the Constitution, I guess, and like the way that people have come together to live in society.
Right. So in other words, it's essentially when you take your hat off and stand up out of respect for the flag, you're kind of manifesting in a bodily way your respect for allegiance to your country.
Right. But it's not specifically for that flag.
Obviously. Right. Yeah. It's not like the flag itself.
That'd be weird. Like, that'd be some interesting religion.
That'd be a weird form of idolatry.
Yes.
which is why also it's huge for who was the guy who kneeled, the football player?
Colin Kaepernick. Yeah, he's the one that started that whole. I guess you would call it movement. I don't know.
But that's huge if you think about it, because at least I would say for most Americans. Well, actually, I don't know. You could debate that. At least for me, when I stand and if I'm wearing a hat, take my hat off for the flag when the national anthem plays, I'm not worshiping the United States, but it's a sign of respect, right? And that's kind of, or that has been the general kind of cultural consensus, that is an important sign that one should do in order to pay proper respect to your nation as a sign of or act of patriotism. But when Colin Kaepernick started that, I guess if you want to call it a movement of blatantly disrespecting the flag, and then as time has gone on, more and more people have, for lack of a better way of saying it, become okay with that. What does that do with regards to the way people view the flag with relation to the country?
I mean, it seems like there's obviously a lack of respect, and it's kind of funny because all these people, when they're kneeling, they're kneeling against the flag essentially and what it stands for, while at the same time they're still benefiting from all that flag sort of represents at the same time. There's sort of a cognitive dissonance, maybe you would say, or there's a disconnect there.
They're also giving it power.
The flag power?
Or what the flag represents, right?
How do you mean?
So
because they're recognizing it as something that's important, and that important enough, I guess, for them to kind of proactively be against.
Yeah, exactly. It's whatever the flag represents in their minds is bad enough that they feel the need to just kneel against it or symbolize opposition to it.
Yeah.
But that very act of doing that is recognizing that there's something behind the flag that they don't like, and that they're reacting towards. Because if you don't care about something, you're not going to react to it.
Yeah, that's
right. If let's say you're not patriotic, but you also don't hate the United States, well, you might just stand up anyways and just be like, whatever, I'll just take my cap off. Whatever, right? But you don't really care one way or another. But when you go against a cultural norm to that degree,
it's really deeper. Right. It's not indifference.
Now, another, I guess a question along those same lines, but phrased slightly differently. Okay, you're 9 years old.
Okay.
And you're at the Penguins hockey game, and you see most people in the crowd don't stand up for the national anthem and don't take their hats off. What are you thinking as a 9-year-old?
I guess I'm thinking like must not be that important if most of the people don't show any respect for it. Yeah. It also seemed like, why are we doing this?
Yeah. I mean, at least speaking for myself, I probably wouldn't have thought very hard about it. But at the very least, I probably would have thought of like, okay, why are we doing this if nobody cares?
Yeah.
Right? Like, seems pretty pointless. Which is a nice little segue into natural signs, of which Jude is an expert.
Yeah, yes, I'm definitely an expert. I guess we could start with the definition of a natural sign. I think something we had is the sign points to something because of a natural connection. So, like an example of that would be smoke is a natural sign of fire, and this would be sort of like different than a conventional sign, which would be like something that man recognizes, that man have agreed to recognize means something. So like a stop sign, like a red octagon means stop, at least in America. I think it might be a universal sign, honestly. I haven't been to Europe, but I'm pretty sure. Anyways, not really.
Well, here's the real question. Most important question of the podcast. You're approaching a traffic light. What do you do when the light's turning yellow?
Oh, you accelerate, of course.
Oh, okay, good. That's the correct answer.
Yeah, but anyways, the red octagon means stop, but it's not something naturally within us that we make that connection. It's something that men have agreed to. So that's kind of the little bit of a distinction there, I guess.
Right. Like it could have been theoretically blue or green or yellow or whatever.
It could have been a triangle. Anyways, so natural signs it points to something because of a natural connection, I guess. Very basically. Yeah. And then that kind of gets into like a little bit of human nature, a little philosophy. So like certain human bodily actions are natural signs of spiritual realities because man is a soul body composite. And so the soul is immaterial. So the soul is the form, like, yeah, I'm kind of just going to say this without these premises without actually like, going through proving that each one is valid. Like, the soul is the form of the body, and then the soul is immaterial. So things that we do with our bodies can have natural connections to the immaterial. So I'm thinking of, for example, like genuflecting is, it's like a physical action that we do with our body, a bodily action, but it's a natural sign of reverence towards, towards God. As Catholics, we genuflect, kneel a lot. There's a lot of kneeling.
Yeah, to be honest, my knees sometimes hurt.
It's random. What?
I just said sometimes my knees hurt after a really long high mass, but it's all good for the glory of God.
Yeah. Yes.
No, but right. So, and that's going to be important. But so natural signs as being, I guess, like physical, material actions, whatever those be, and that can things that can fall under that too. I think that people don't really think about is speech, words. Those are material signs, right? Like it's like speech requires sound waves, which are, well, actually, I don't know what sound waves are. All I know is that there's a material component to them.
Well, yeah, sound has to travel through a physical medium.
Exactly.
So, Yeah.
But like, you know, take words, for instance, language. Language are all signs. Like, why does giraffe refer to the African animal with the really long neck? Well,
sort of arbitrary.
Yeah, I mean, it could have just as well been like hippo,
And
vice versa. But it's still like those signs still mean something, and I think that's the important thing. Is that whatever sign you're talking about, whether it be language, speech, writing, the written word, physical actions, so like genuflecting, anything that falls into any of those categories, they convey some sort of meaning and reinforce that meaning. So it's almost like a feedback loop, right? Like, let's say I'm the first person to come up with the name giraffe for a giraffe. But then the next day I call it a zebra. Well, there's no consistency there, right? Is it a giraffe or is it a zebra?
So like the natural sign,
whatever it is,
right? Yeah, that ply to that animal changed. So that's not reinforcing, like you were saying, the meaning.
Right. Exactly. Like if every day I call it a giraffe, and then everyone around me starts calling it a giraffe, well then that constantly using that sign or that natural symbol is going to at the same time reinforce our belief that creature that we're calling a giraffe is a giraffe. And then I guess to extend the analogy a little bit further, like what if 200 years down the line, Jude comes along and starts calling it a crocodile? And then everyone's like, what are you smoking, Jude? But then Jude organizes a little council. And
oh no, here we go.
Free saying that the creature that was once known as a giraffe should now be called a crocodile, and then everybody has to start using that term for that animal. Well, then if people start doing that over time, the constant use and repetition of the word crocodile with reference to that particular animal is going to be reinforced in the minds of whoever's using it, and they're eventually going to start believing that the creature that they called or that they're calling a crocodile is actually a crocodile.